we're going to talk about the white man's burden and how that concept is intrinsically linked to the sort of do somethingist interventionists of today who cannot imagine the West not sticking its nose in every single thing all around the world and quote unquote fixing the problem, and who frame not doing that as isolationism. The White Man's Burden was like a book written in the late 19th century advocating for the US colonization of the Philippines, the annexation of the Philippines, in order to civilize the uncivilized non-white inhabitants who needed to be shown how to be good, and good meant being like white Westerners. But the concept existed long before that, just without that specific name. It's never genuine. It's not genuine. It's a justification. It was, and before that, and after that, it was always a justification for Western colonizers to pursue their own interests in countries with people where the fact that these people were not white acted as a convenient justification for them to do so. Like, oh, we need to colonize this place because we are white, we are superior, and we will civilize these people. They will benefit from us conquering their land and exploiting them, etc. Same thing was used to justify the slavery of black people. Oh, they benefit from being slaves. You know, we're teaching them how to be civilized. They'd be worse off without us. Any sort of like historical analysis of the world, of the ideologies of today, you see this in all of them still. The justifications may have changed slightly. The modus operandi, the goals have changed quite a bit. Like instead of, for example, direct conquest and annexation and rule, you get like proxy rule with like enforcement of specific economic systems and relations that benefit the West in much the same way, just without so much of a direct investment. You know, the imposition of political systems that are more easy for them to control, more amicable to their interests, all justified through the idea that these things are better, you know? So you get countries that are overwhelmingly white in the Western world, and they say, we need to do things to these other countries in order to spread democracy to them because we know better than their people do, than their governments do, or whatever. And we need to impose our superior economic system on them, which just so happens to also be incredibly beneficial for the interests of our bourgeoisie, for our economic hegemony. You know, that's a coincidence, okay? We're actually doing this to benefit the people there. It's the same thing. And the people in power don't sincerely believe it. For them, it's a justification. And a lot of the people who support them also don't sincerely believe this bullshit. It's just, for them, it's the exact same thing. But it's the same thing. It's interlinked. Like, you can't just disconnect these things. Like, the history of European colonialism, its justifications, its practice, it's all linked to the way that European countries and their settler states act today. Like, the liberals would have you ignore all of this and act like, oh, come on, man, that's just colonialism. It's ancient history. Things aren't like that anymore. The West really spreads democracy now when it's the same shit. It's the exact same sort of shit. We are superior whites. We know better than you. We're going to come in and show you, either through direct force or through some form of coercion, be it economic, social, political, geopolitical. We're going to force you to do what we think is best for you, or at least what we say we think is best for you. But in reality, we want to do it because it will benefit us more. It will help us to exploit you in the most efficient way possible. And this is like something that the average like anarcho-NATOist, that's a great term. I'm going to keep using it. The average, because you guys know exactly what I mean when I use it. Like the average anarcho-NATOist thinks exactly in those terms. Like, we need to spread democracy, aka liberal capitalist democracy, neoliberalism, to these countries. We need to get in there. We are the ones who can solve their problems, who can give them freedom and democracy. Us superior white people and our ideology. Now, obviously, just in the way that there are literally Slavic Nazis, which is completely nonsensical, there are also people who aren't white who are like ideologues of this same sort of ideology, or at least tacit supporters of it. You know, there are black people in the US who support US hegemony. There are people in the countries that are victims of US imperialism who support it. Some of them are victims of, like, you know, the thing that I went over earlier in the stream, being like the global pro-Western media bias, overall ideology, etc. And others are people who perhaps stand to benefit from it themselves, or who are happy to go along with like being a puppet. But like everything about this is interlinked. It's obviously ludicrous to have, like, many of these countries, by the way, are still actively colonists. France, Britain, the US, all of these countries still have actual, real, legitimate, straight up directly ruled colonies. And they're going around the world like being like, we may be like the same block of powers that have spent the last few centuries genociding you guys, but look, now we genuinely have your interests at heart. I know we said these same things when we colonized you last time, but this time it's different. Just please accept our free market, capitalist economic impositions, this IMF loan, and our military invasion. And that so many like Westerners like buy into this too just shows how dumb the average Westerner is. As bad as like Russian imperialism, for example, is, I at least appreciate that they're honest about it. It's just like, we're invading Ukraine because Ukraine's Russia, all right? We're going to take it over. Ukrainians aren't real. They're just Russians. It's like, okay, you're a fucking fascist piece of shit, but at least you're honest. Thank you for that, at least. Like, don't give me this fucking white man's burden, we're spreading freedom and democracy bullshit. Just be like, I want the oil. I want the fucking oil, you know? I want the oil, or, you know, I want your economy to be open to our imports, to our companies coming in and buying off everything you have. I want you to export your primary materials to us at rates that are favorable for us. And I want to install a government that will ensure that this cannot change. Please be honest about it, okay? I would appreciate it if Western imperialists were honest. At least the Russians are honest, okay? China also knows how to sell their imperialism better than the US, honestly. Far better than the US. The US is learning from them, actually. The US is like trying to sell like infrastructure projects and shit, which is all like, you know, sort of soft power or hard power in many respects, in the way that China does, like mutual benefit, blah, blah, blah. Because I think they might be slowly realizing that the freedom and democracy thing doesn't really sell. Though it is selling a lot more recently. And like people, right-wingers who for some reason pretend to be leftists, buy it hook, line, and sinker. Like they legitimately believe that like the US needs to keep intervening all over the world. Europe needs to keep intervening all over the world. Because they install democracy and freedom. And they stop genocides and they stop evil dictators. You know, I'll tell you something right now. An evil dictator who doesn't sell off their entire fucking country to the West is better than your generic like Western puppet in a nominally democratic but obviously not liberal democracy who just sells off their entire fucking country to the West. Because that's going to cause far more suffering than a dictator could ever hope to do. I would appreciate it if when the USA invaded Iraq, instead of like trying desperately to construct some sort of elaborate story about WMDs with like fucking vials of salt at the UN and shit, they just said, I am invading Iraq because Saddam Hussein is a drug addict. That would have been so much better. It's more plausible. I am invading Iraq because Iraq isn't a real country. It's actually the next US state. Just say that. Just say some dumb fucking shit like that, please. Don't insult my intelligence with the fucking white man's burden garbage. The same shit they've been going with for like the last fucking hundreds upon hundreds of years. We're genociding you because we are bringing you civilization. No, you're genociding them because you want the fucking oil. You know, you're supporting death squads in Latin America because you want the fucking US big farming companies to not have their land appropriated. You want your companies to be able to get in there and freely exploit those mines. You want those countries to be dependent on you, to be dependent on your imports and dependent on exporting primary products to you at incredibly low prices. That's what you want. Just be honest about it. Or at least just concoct some fucking bullshit narrative about denazification and them being drug addicts. Yeah, that would be far better. Get out here with your white man's burden, democracy and freedom. We're doing this for liberty, to help the people bullshit. You're never doing it. It never even results in that, even by accident. And anyone who even implies that has ever happened or could ever happen, is a complete fucking moron with no systemic analysis of the world. That's what liberalism is. Liberalism is like this feel-good idea where you never need to think about how things are part of a wider whole, and you just like look at them as isolated acts. And that's how the white man's burden idea works as well. That's what modern liberalism is, the white man's burden, just slightly changed, spread by the exact same people. Like fucking France, the US, Germany, being like, hey, you know, we might have been genociding you 50, 100 years ago, but now we're here and we have your interests at heart. Give me a fucking break. You gotta be so fucking stupid to believe that. And that's really just sums up the supposed left in America. That's what they believe. Like, we just gotta do good imperialism. Iraq was bad, but it was only bad because the motivations, the overt motivations didn't line up with the hidden motivation. No, the overt motivations are bad too. Colonialist bullshit. Repackaged generic European colonialist ideology for the 21st century.